I'm Emily Walker, 33 years old, the daughter they trained themselves not to see. At every dinner, my sister Claire was the sun, and I was the shadow that proved her shine. My father carved legacy into her plate. My mother spun excuses into silk, while I learned to make silence a strategy. But the night Claire mocked my life as cute as though my work meant nothing I understood. They hadn't overlooked me, they had erased me. Ever been told you don't matter in your own family? Hit like if you've ever had your worth dismissed. Comment if you know how it feels to be the forgotten one. It started at that table under the chandelier when my father raised his glass and gave Claire everything. Emily forces a smile, but her eyes gleam with restrained defiance. They thought I pushed papers. In truth, I pulled strings across continents. The hum of recycled air in the SIF was constant, a dull backdrop to the rhythm of keystrokes and low-voiced directives. Manhattan pulsed outside, neon and steel pressing against the soundproofed walls, but in here reality shrank to screens glowing with encrypted data. I slid my badge across the sensor, the lock disengaging with a muted click. Inside, rows of monitors traced lines of money, whispers of guns, diamonds, and favors traded in the shadows. Here no one brushed me aside. Here my silence commanded more weight than my words ever did at the dinner table. The files loaded slowly, lines of numbers stretching into webs of meaning. To the untrained eye, it was nothing but ledgers and transfers. To me, it was a confession waiting to be read. My fingers skimmed across the keyboard, summoning patterns that bent toward inevitability accounts, spiderwebbing from Zurich to Dubai, from the Caymans to a shell in Delaware. Each thread led back to one name: Volkov. Mike Turner leaned against my desk, coffee in hand, his tie loosened just enough to break the illusion of rigidity. "You've been on this trail for 3 weeks without blinking, Em. You ever going to breathe?" I didn't look up. "Breathing wastes seconds." He chuckled, shaking his head. "And people think you're stuck in some cubicle. If only your sister knew her little digs at you are aimed at the wrong person entirely." "Leave her out of this," I murmured, though a sting remained. On the screen, a flagged transfer blinked red. My pulse quickened. Gifts. Marked as wedding contributions, their origins painted with Volkov's fingerprints. The amounts were too neat. 35,000 wired from a supposedly dormant foundation, 12,000 in event support, routed through a shipping firm notorious for off-the-books cargo. I scrolled the words, pressing deeper into my skull. Wedding. Contributions. I forced my breath steady. Claire's voice from last night echoed Bentley's peonies senators. A pageant built not only on attention, but on something darker. The secure door hissed open behind me. Director Harris entered, her expression chiseled from granite. Her presence shifted the room without words. "Walker," she said, sliding a file across my desk. "You're too deep in this. These threads." She tapped the screen with one finger, steady but sharp. "They lead to the wrong kind of people noticing you." I straightened. "If we don't follow them, who will?" Her eyes lingered on me, weighing something beyond loyalty. "Interpol can't protect you if this bleeds into your personal life. And from what I'm seeing, it already has." I swallowed hard because she was right. My family name had just lit up across channels meant for predators, not daughters. Mike glanced between us, unease flickering behind his sarcasm. "Harris is right, Em. You've got skin in this game now. It's not just names and transfers, it's bloodlines." "Bloodlines," I echoed, staring at the highlighted accounts. Another transfer appeared, bold, recent. Daniel Whitmore, Claire's fiancé. My throat went dry. The neatness of it, the audacity, it was all tied together. The man paraded in my parents' dining room was standing at the center of an empire laundering cash through sham charities and jewel imports. Every toast, every congratulation had been underwritten by crime. I leaned back in the chair, the leather cold against my palms. For a moment, all I could see was Claire's hand raised in triumph, diamond blazing beneath the chandelier. That stone wasn't just a symbol of privilege, it was proof. Bought no doubt through the money funneled here. Emily. Harris's voice dropped softer now, but no less stern. You have to decide if this is about the job or about you. I exhaled slowly, fighting to keep my composure. It's both. The fluorescent lights buzzed harsh and unforgiving. Mike pushed away from the desk, muttering low enough that only I heard. One day, your family will choke on how wrong they were. My mother only called when she needed me to disappear. The phone rang just after midnight, slicing through the hum of the city, pressing against my apartment windows. Manhattan never slept, but I often wished I could. I stared at the glowing screen, the word mom etched across it like an accusation. Calls from her came sparingly, almost never for birthdays or casual check-ins, but always when Claire needed something. My thumb hovered, then I answered. Emily Margaret's voice filled the line, soft but heavy, as though rehearsed. Please don't cause trouble at the wedding. I blinked at the shadows stretching across my apartment. Trouble, I hadn't said a word. What do you mean, I asked, though I already knew. She sighed, the kind of sigh she used when smoothing a wrinkle in a tablecloth, pretending it wasn't there. You know how your sister is. She's fragile. She gets nervous, worked up over little things. This wedding, it's her dream. If you do anything to draw attention away from her, it will crush her. I closed my eyes. Images flooded back, uninvited. Claire's birthday cakes taller than my head, while mine were store-bought and rushed. Claire's recitals with the whole family clapping, while my science fair ribbon was lost somewhere in a drawer. So you're saying I should stay quiet, I murmured. It's not about silencing you. She rushed through, her tone carried no conviction. It's about protecting Claire. She's always needed more from us. You're strong, Emily. You always have been. You don't need the spotlight. The words cut deeper than she realized. Strong. As if strength were a consolation prize for being invisible. You've been saying that since I was 8 years old, I whispered. Every scraped knee, every slammed door, Emily can take it. Did you ever ask if I wanted to? Her pause said enough. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight. Claire's in a delicate place. Daniel means so much to her, to us. Just don't ruin this for her. Please. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, the silence between us swelling with every unspoken memory. I thought of hiding behind my bedroom door as Claire screamed at a boyfriend, while Mom soothed her, telling her she was beautiful, too sensitive for this world. I thought of myself 14 crying over a scholarship rejection, and Mom simply patting my shoulder, reminding me to be proud of Claire's pageant crown. Fragile, I repeated, my voice bitter. What about me? Mom, don't I need support? The question lingered, a raw thread pulled from years of restraint. Margaret didn't answer right away. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the faint hum of traffic through my window. Finally, she said, barely audible, "You'll be fine, Emily. You always are." The dam inside me cracked. My throat tightened as I whispered, "Good night, Mom," and hung up before her sigh could seep into me again. The room seemed colder now. I turned back to my laptop, the glow spilling across scattered notes, maps of accounts and encrypted transfers. The log stared back at me, merciless and undeniable. Volkov wedding account. The title blazed across the top of the screen. Another transfer had landed, a payment disguised as a catering invoice, but I knew better. I leaned forward, my pulse matching the blinking cursor. The betrayal wasn't just Claire's mockery anymore. It was systemic, embedded in the very event my mother begged me to protect. They wanted me invisible, but the truth sat here glaring, demanding to be seen. My eyes fixed on the screen, sharp and unblinking. Wire transfer logs piled up, each one a nail in the coffin Claire was building for herself without even knowing. They raised glasses to Claire's future. I raised mine to the lies paying for it. The ballroom shimmered like it had been dipped in gold. Chandeliers spilled light across marble floors. Waiters glided between clusters of sequined gowns and tailored suits, and at the center of it all was Claire, my sister, glowing in a white dress that caught every flashbulb and spotlight, as though the universe had conspired to crown her tonight. Guests circled her like moths around a flame, each eager to bask in her shine, each quick to forget the girl standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. Daniel Volkov, her fiancé, was the perfect match for this theater. Tall, dark hair sculpted into precision, his smile sharp enough to slice through suspicion. He shook hands with diplomats, charmed old family friends with stories from his ventures abroad, and slid compliments across the room like polished coins. Even Robert, our father, beamed, puffed up with pride as he clapped Daniel's shoulder and declared, "This union secures our family's legacy." Legacy. As if Claire had been chosen by destiny, as if I hadn't been in the same bloodline all along. I sipped my champagne, the bubbles sharp against my tongue, and tried to look small. The less I was noticed, the freer I felt to watch, to listen. My eyes darted to the heavy velvet curtains at the side of the ballroom, where Daniel leaned in close to another man I recognized, only from dossiers, Oscar Markov, one of Volkov's lieutenants. Their voices were low, almost swallowed by the clatter of silverware and laughter, but the Russian curled sharp in my ears, familiar enough after months of study. Shipments, accounts, bride as cover. Words that clawed at my chest with their brazenness. I tilted my head, pretending to admire the floral arrangements, and shifted closer. The small diamond stud in my ear, a gift from Interpol, masked as jewelry, glowed faintly as it recorded. Every syllable, every hushed inflection tucked neatly away for later dissection. Across the ballroom, Robert was making another toast. He raised his glass high, commanding the room like a conductor. To Claire, he boomed his voice thick with pride. My daughter, who has always been destined for greatness, and to Daniel, who joins our family with ambition and honor. Together, they carry the Walker name into history. The room erupted in cheers, glasses clinking, laughter soaring. I forced my lips into the shape of a smile, but my hand tightened around the stem of the glass until it threatened to snap. Margaret hovered at Robert's side, glowing faintly in his orbit, murmuring to guests about the wedding's details, the silk imported from Paris, the orchestra booked for the ceremony. Her eyes flickered to me once, an almost imperceptible nod that said, "Don't ruin this. Don't make waves." I let the noise wash over me. Claire twirled her engagement ring under the lights, deliberately stretching her hand, so the diamond cast prisms across the room. She basked in admiration, lapping up every compliment about Daniel's generosity, her beauty, their fairy tale future. She locked eyes with me, then lips curling in triumph, as though daring me to contradict the fantasies she had built on blood and laundered money. Daniel's laughter drifted back from the curtain. He squeezed Oscar's shoulder, whispering something that made them both grin before they separated seamlessly into the crowd. I felt the weight of my earring warm against my skin and knew I had captured more than enough to prove that Daniel Volkov wasn't a prince, but a predator. As the evening pressed on, guests danced beneath chandeliers, their gowns whirling, their smiles oblivious. I slipped through the edges of the crowd, blending into the wallpaper, carrying secrets no one here wanted to know. When I reached the bar to refill my glass, Claire swept up beside me, perfume sharp and cloying, her smile razor thin. She leaned in close enough that only I could hear her words, though her lips kept their public curve. "Try not to embarrass me at my own wedding, Emily." On a single sheet of paper, my worth was reduced to nothing. The lawyer's office smelled faintly of leather polish and stale coffee, a place designed to soothe to signal authority. Framed certificates lined the walls, heavy books sagged on shelves, and the blinds were half drawn against the April light. I sat at the long oak table, hands folded in my lap, while Robert leaned forward as if he owned not only the room, but time itself. Claire sat beside him, draped in a pale suit that screamed new money, her ring flashing like a weapon every time she moved her hand. Margaret hovered at the end of the table, her smile brittle, her fingers twisting a handkerchief she had carried for decades. The lawyer, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice like dry paper, unfolded the will. His words came measured, rehearsed, as though he had practiced stripping me down to air. The estate, the properties, investments, business shares would pass primarily to Claire. I was mentioned, yes, in a paragraph so slim it might have been a typo. A token bequest phrased as if I were a distant cousin instead of Robert's flesh and blood. The room swelled with silence until Claire's laughter cut through it, tinkling and cruel. "Don't worry, sis," she said, turning her bright eyes on me. "I'll save you a guest room. Maybe in the pool house. It'll be cozy." She leaned back in her chair, savoring the moment like a toast made at my expense. Robert didn't scold her. He didn't even look ashamed. He cleared his throat, nodding slightly as though her words were harmless banter. "You know it's about preserving legacy, Emily," he said, his voice carrying the same pomp as at the gala. "Claire's the one positioned to uphold what I've built. You've chosen a quieter life. Quieter life." My chest burned. The memories of boardrooms I'd slipped into under cover names, networks I'd unraveled across borders, criminals who cursed my reports as they were led away in handcuffs. They all clashed violently with the image Robert painted of me, the invisible daughter with no stake, no value. I looked at Margaret, hoping for one flicker of defense. Instead, she smiled faintly, almost apologetically, as though to say, "This is for the best. Keep peace, Emily. Let Claire shine." I realized then that expecting her to step forward for me was a fantasy I had never quite let go of, one I could finally bury. The lawyer droned on about clauses, contingencies, tax implications. My ears roared with blood. I felt the rage coil inside me, sharp but strangely steady, like a blade honed against stone. My lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I don't need your houses," I said, my voice cutting through the air cold enough that even Claire stopped preening for a breath. "I'll build my own walls." The lawyer cleared his throat, shuffling papers nervously. Robert frowned as though I had disrespected his empire. Claire rolled her eyes, tossing her hair like a queen dismissing a servant. But Margaret, just for a moment, glanced at me with something close to fear. She saw something shift, and she knew it was permanent. I rose from my chair before the meeting ended, before another word could be etched into memory. My heels clicked against the marble floor as I walked out of the office and into the sharp air of Newark. The city buzzed with cars, horns, the hum of life moving on. I slipped my phone from my coat pocket, fingers steady as stone, and dialed. When Mike answered, I didn't waste breath. I stared down at the sidewalk, my reflection caught in a shop window, my eyes colder, sharper, alive. "It's time," I said. My voice didn't waver. "Trojan Bride begins now." I once believed if I worked twice as hard, they'd finally see me. Instead, I became the shadow that made Claire shine brighter. The words echoed in my mind as I sat cross-legged on the floor of my apartment, the city's lights flickering through the blinds like restless spirits. Around me lay the photo albums Margaret had boxed and pressed into my hands years ago, as if giving me scraps would substitute for love. The pages smelled faintly of dust and perfume. The scent of old paper mingled with the silence of a childhood I had tried so hard to escape. Each page was a knife. Claire beamed at birthday cakes 3 tiers high, her golden hair catching the light as if the universe conspired to spotlight her. I traced the edge of a picture where I stood in the background, cropped by accident or intention, holding plates, watching. My hands shook when I found the high school graduation spread, Claire in flowing robes, clutching her art award like a crown jewel. Right beside it, in the corner of the page, was me, stiff smile medal around my neck for top scores in mathematics. The caption Margaret had written beneath read, "Claire makes us proud again." My name wasn't even there. I closed my eyes, the memory clawing back uninvited. Robert's booming laugh at the ceremony as he ruffled Claire's hair, Margaret's teary pride, the endless chorus of relatives singing her praises. I had stood a few feet away holding my metal heat, burning through me a hollow pit where acknowledgement should have been. That night I told myself if I worked harder, if I solved problems no one else could, if I vanished into tireless labor they would see me. They never did. Now the city hummed outside, horns echoing through the night, but the silence inside my apartment was deafening. I whispered into the emptiness a vow more than a statement. Not anymore. The words tasted sharp, steady. They weren't the desperate plea of a child, but the declaration of a woman who had stopped waiting for recognition. The laptop screen glowed on the coffee table, its blue light carving shadows across my walls. I glanced down and froze. An encrypted message had appeared in my secure inbox, the Interpol seal embedded in the header. My pulse quickened. I drew the laptop onto my knees, fingers hesitating over the keyboard before opening it. Harris's name blazed across the top. The message was short, each word heavy as lead. "We need final proof. Risk is yours." I stared at the sentence, the weight of it pressing against every scar I carried. Proof meant exposure. Proof meant risking not only my cover, but any chance of shielding my family from the fallout. Proof meant Claire's perfect world colliding with the truth she had mocked me for living. My reflection in the dark screen looked older, harder, a woman sculpted by neglect and sharpened by secrets. I felt the years of silence behind me, each cut, each dismissal converging into this single point. My hand hovered above the mouse. I exhaled slowly, the tension spilling from my chest into the room. Then, with a steady click, I pressed accept. They invited me as a guest. I planned to attend as their executioner. The words ran like a pulse beneath my skin as I entered the sterile, windowless confines of the SIF in Lower Manhattan. The humming of machines filled the room, punctuated by the low murmur of analysts already bent over their screens, eyes reflecting endless streams of coded data. It smelled faintly of burnt coffee and recycled air, the kind of place where lives changed in silence, unseen by the world. My badge clicked against the reader and the door sealed shut behind me. Tonight, this was not about numbers on a screen. Tonight, this was about war. Director Harris stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, expression carved from stone. His presence could still silence the room without a word, a reminder of decades in intelligence. Mike sat at his side, flipping a pen between his fingers, jaw tight, watching me as if he already knew I had walked in carrying fire. I slid a folder across the table, the words Trojan Bride stamped in bold across the cover. The title itself made the analysts look up. I spoke evenly, refusing to let the tremor of personal stakes slip into my voice. Every Volkov lieutenant, every money handler, every shadow who's been untouchable will be there. They think it's a wedding. I see it as a summit of criminals in tuxedos. One strike, one operation, and we cut the head from the snake. The projector flickered alive, filling the wall with photographs of Daniel Volkov shaking hands with politicians, his father's empire spread across Europe, his cousins laundering cash through offshore accounts. They'll all converge in New Jersey, May 18th. I continued, voice sharpening. Surrounded by champagne flutes and floral arches, they'll finally let their guard down. No safe houses, no encrypted lines, just family, just celebration. That's their blind spot. Harris slammed his hand on the table, startling one of the younger analysts. His voice was controlled but edged like broken glass. "You're too close, Emily. This isn't a sting on strangers. This is your sister's life. You compromise objectivity, you compromise the mission." His eyes pinned me, testing for cracks. The anger rose, but I steadied it into steel. I'm the only one who has access inside that world. They dismiss me. They mock me. And that's my advantage. Claire believes I'm nothing, and Daniel doesn't even see me. Their arrogance is the hole in their armor. If you want results, if you want their empire on its knees, then you need me inside that ballroom. A heavy silence followed, punctuated only by the buzz of the fluorescent lights. Mike leaned forward, pen finally still. His voice was low, careful. She's right. They only feel safe there. Every camera, every wire, every recording we place will matter only if she's in the room to steer the storm. The tension in Harris's jaw pulsed. For a long moment, I thought he would shut it down. Consign Trojan Bride to the drawer of reckless dreams. Instead, he exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple as if conceding to inevitability. His eyes met mine with a weight that pinned me harder than any reprimand. Trojan Bride is a go. My lungs filled, but there was no relief, only the realization that approval meant no turning back. Around me, the analysts began firing off tasks, network maps, undercover roles, transport coordination. Screens shifted to seating charts and logistics. I watched it all with a calm that barely held beneath the surface. Mike drifted close as the room swelled with motion. His shoulder brushed mine, his voice just above a whisper, words meant for no one else. This will either make you or destroy you. And in the pit of my stomach, I already knew he was right. Her gown glowed like innocence. Her words dripped with rot. The boutique was a cathedral of glass and satin, its chandeliers catching every sequin and pearl as if holiness could be stitched into silk. Mirrors stretched from floor to ceiling, multiplying Claire in 1,000 radiant angles. She twirled ivory skirts billowing around her, her laughter ringing like polished crystal. I sat stiffly on the plush sofa, my jeans suddenly too sharp a contrast against the curated luxury. The staff hovered like priests awaiting a commandment, hands folded, smiles frozen. Claire's eyes caught me in the mirror. Emily, really that shirt? Did you crawl here from your cubicle? She let the gown swirl, letting the insult land lightly as if it were no more harmful than a breeze. The attendants giggled nervously, then drowned the sound in compliments about the hemline. I forced a smile, one I had practiced my entire life, the kind that said nothing and hid everything. The dress is beautiful, I murmured, watching her face more than the gown. Her radiance wasn't joy, it was hunger. As she fussed with a diamond belt, I let the words slip out, careful, calculated. Are you sure about Daniel's finances? Weddings can be expensive, and... She turned sharply, veil brushing her cheek. So what? Her tone was venom wrapped in satin. He gives me a life you'll never have. Do you think I care how the money comes? Do you think I'd trade penthouses and drivers for your shoebox apartment and takeout containers? The room chilled, though the air was perfumed with roses and new fabric. The attendants froze, sensing the air shift, their practiced smiles faltering. Claire's eyes burned, the softness of bride-to-be extinguished by something far older, sharper. She stepped closer, skirts whispering over the carpet, her voice pitched low enough for only me. Listen to me, Emily. If you ruin this, if you so much as whisper one word about Daniel, I will destroy you. The venom was unfiltered now, every syllable honed like a blade. I didn't flinch. My thumb, already resting on my phone, slid across the record button. The soft glow of the screen was hidden beneath my hand, invisible to the mirrors and the staff's oblivious eyes. Her words etched themselves into digital permanence proof, wrapped in silk and lace. She spun again before the staff could notice, the tension, arms flung wide like a ballerina, her smile dazzling as if nothing had passed. They clapped softly, praising her glow, her grace, her future. She basked in it, feeding on their awe. But my phone, silent and steady, held her threat like a seed waiting for the right soil. And in that moment, watching my sister beam in the mirror, I knew she wasn't a blind pawn in Daniel's empire. She was choosing the rot, stitching it into her gown, into her vows, into the life she believed she deserved. And I had the evidence to prove it. Legacy, my father called it. I called it erasure. The Walker living room had always been a gallery of Claire. Her school portraits framed along the staircase, her piano recital photo centered above the mantel, her newspaper clippings carefully preserved in gold-trimmed frames. Even the air smelled faintly of polish and roses, as if the room itself had been designed to host her triumphs. I sat stiffly on the leather armchair, my hands folded so tightly in my lap that my knuckles ached. Robert stood at the fireplace, a document folder in his hands. His tone was calm, measured, but it carried the finality of a verdict. The property transfer will be finalized before the wedding. It's the right thing. Claire and Daniel will carry the Walker name into the future. My chest hollowed out as if the walls had leaned in and pressed the air from my lungs. Into the future, I repeated, voice brittle. Dad, you're handing everything to a mafia family. Do you even realize who Daniel is? Do you care what you're doing to me? Margaret's eyes darted nervously between us, her hands wringing the hem of her sweater. Emily, please, not now. This is about family unity, about legacy. Legacy. The word seared me like acid. I had lived in its shadow since birth. Claire the heir, Emily the afterthought. Claire lounged across the sofa, champagne flute in hand, though it was barely noon. Her laughter tinkled sharp and cruel. Better than your spreadsheet, sis. At least Daniel knows how to make something of himself. What have you done? Balanced a few budgets? The word sliced through me more cleanly than a blade. I swallowed, but the lump in my throat refused to move. I've done more than you'll ever understand. I whispered, my voice trembling on the edge of rage. Robert's gaze was firm, unyielding. Enough, Emily. This isn't a debate. This is decided. Heat climbed up my neck into my face until I felt I might combust. The room swam, their faces blurring, their voices fading into a drone of dismissal. Without another word, I grabbed my bag, my heels striking hard against the polished floor, and stormed out. The front door slammed behind me, but it didn't shut out the echo of their contempt. By the time I reached my car, the tremors had started. My hands shook so violently I fumbled the keys twice before collapsing into the driver's seat. The tears came fast, unstoppable, blurring the suburban streetlights into streaks of cruel brightness. My forehead pressed against the steering wheel. Why wasn't I ever enough? The words tore out of me raw and broken, spilling into the small, suffocating space. For years I had swallowed their silence, their jokes, their careless cuts. But hearing my father speak of legacy as though I didn't exist, it pierced deeper than all the rest. I sobbed until my breath caught in ragged gasps, the leather seat wet beneath my cheek. When the storm of it finally slowed, I forced myself upright, fingers trembling as I wiped my face. My bag was on the passenger seat. My laptop waited inside. With a numb kind of precision, I flipped it open. The glow filled the dark car, sterile blue light cutting through the shadows. On the screen, the ballroom blueprints, unfurled walls, exits, hidden corridors. The place where their empire thought it would celebrate its triumph. My tears dried into a new expression. Not defeat. Not despair. Determination. The night might have stripped me raw, but the glowing lines on my screen stitched me back together with a new purpose. And this time, they would see me. The city slept. I rehearsed the moment every mask would fall. The hum of Manhattan outside my window had dulled into a restless silence. Even the sirens seemed muted tonight, as if the city itself held its breath before the coming storm. My apartment was a fortress of shadows lit only by the pale glow of my laptop and the constellation of schematics, blueprints, and guest lists spread across the dining table. Lines of ink crossed paths like arteries tracing exits and blind spots of the ballroom. Every door, every corridor, every inch had been memorized until they were carved into my bones. The cursor blinked on the guest list: Volkov Patriarch's cousins, associates, all names tied to accounts I had traced through months of sleepless nights. Each one represented a node in the web, and tomorrow all those nodes would sit beneath the same crystal chandeliers. My secure phone buzzed, its vibration shattering the fragile quiet. Harris's voice came through, low and hard-edged. "One wrong move, Emily, and it's chaos. You're not walking into a controlled arrest. You're walking into a lion's den, and you're the bait." My eyes flicked back to the map of the ballroom. That's exactly why it'll work. They think I'm invisible. They think I'll never stand in the center. They won't see the trap until it's closed. There was a long pause on his end, broken only by the faint rustle of papers. "I've seen operations collapse under less. Don't underestimate the weight you're carrying." His voice softened, though, only slightly. "If you falter, it's not just you who pays. It's everyone in that room." The line clicked dead before I could answer, leaving only the silence and the weight of his warning pressing on me. I leaned back, closing my eyes. The memories rose: unbidden Claire's mocking laugh, my father's dismissive tone, my mother's pleas for me to disappear. They had spent years chiseling me down into nothing. Tomorrow, I would show them what that nothing had become. The lock on my door clicked, soft and deliberate. My pulse jumped, but it was only Mike slipping into the apartment with a duffel slung over his shoulder. He set it down, unzipping to reveal black earpieces, discreet wires, encrypted drives. His eyes found mine, steady, unflinching. "Are you ready to watch her fall?" I stared at him, the words sticking in my throat before I forced them out. "I've been ready my whole life." Something flickered across his face: respect, pity, perhaps fear. But he said nothing. He began laying out the gear, his motions efficient, methodical. The room filled with the faint clicking of equipment, the soft rasp of Velcro straps, the quiet weight of inevitability. By 4 a.m., every schematic was burned into me, every camera angle rehearsed, every lie polished to shine like truth. My body ached for rest, but my mind thrummed electric and relentless. I stood by the window, looking out at the sleeping city, the skyline pricking the sky with its teeth. Somewhere across town, florists were arranging white roses, bakers frosting cakes, planners fussing over perfection. The facade of a wedding. And then my gaze dropped to the corner of the room. Draped in plastic, untouched, gleaming beneath the faint spill of moonlight, was Claire's wedding gown, pristine, silent, waiting. It glowed with the promise of tomorrow, but I knew what it really carried: the seed of her downfall. To them, it was paradise. To me, it was a slaughterhouse disguised in lace and champagne. The chandeliers burned like a constellation of suns, scattering gold and crystal over the marble floors. Waiters glided in black and white trays lifted with surgical precision. Laughter rose and fell, buoyed by strings and piano, as if the whole city had gathered under one roof to worship at the altar of Claire Walker's perfect life. She floated through the ballroom like a queen, anointed veil trailing, champagne flute raised high, the crowd parting with awe wherever she passed. I lingered at the edge, a guest by blood, but an intruder by choice, my black dress blending into the shadows. To them, I was a silhouette, a placeholder at a table, the sister whose name no one remembered long enough to carve into a toast. Invisible, that was the mask they handed me at birth. Tonight, I wore it like armor. Robert basked at the center of the room, voice booming, cheeks flushed with wine and pride. "My daughter has married into power," he declared to a cluster of investors and politicians, his chest puffed as if he were the groom himself. Margaret stood nearby, eyes glassy with devotion, nodding to every word, her hand clutching her pearls, like proof of her good fortune. I lifted my flute, the bubbles bitter on my tongue, and pressed the earpiece deeper into my ear. The hum of encrypted channels brushed my hearing voices of agents scattered across the hotel, each stationed like silent sentinels. Every detail unfolded as rehearsed the schematics in my head, syncing with the live murmurs in my ear. The ballroom wasn't a sanctuary tonight. It was a cage, and every gilded guest was already locked inside. Claire reached me at last, her perfume a cloying cloud of roses and wealth. She leaned in, her lips brushing my cheek, the diamonds in her hair catching the chandelier's fire. "Still invisible, aren't you?" She whispered, her words soft enough for no one else to hear. The jab cut deeper than I wanted to admit, but I refused to flinch. I only smiled, the same practiced smile I'd worn since childhood, and let it mask the fire simmering behind my eyes. She moved on before the heat could reach her, already swept into another orbit of admirers, her laughter like glass shattering in the air. Daniel was never far from her side. His tuxedo was perfection, his smile razor sharp, his hand on her waist, a claim staked in flesh and silk. Yet behind the gleam of civility, his eyes were predator's eyes, scanning, measuring, consuming. He worked the crowd with effortless arrogance, shaking hands, exchanging nods, securing loyalty with every gesture. But it was when he drifted toward the bar, Oscar Volkov at his side, that the illusion began to crack. I drifted closer, glass in hand, pretending to study the gilded molding above the bar. My pulse thudded, syncing with the faint static in my earpiece. Daniel's head tilted toward Oscar, their voices dropping to a murmur. The Russian slid between them like smoke. I caught fragments, shipment tonight, secure routes. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass. The mask of paradise held music swelling, champagne flowing, but I saw it then, the veins of rot threading through lace and silk. Daniel's lips curved as he leaned in closer, his words, low, dangerous, and clear. The shipment was real, and tomorrow, paradise would collapse. One word from me, and an empire will collapse. The chandeliers had not dimmed, the music had not faltered, and the dancers still spun beneath the weight of 1,000 admiring eyes. But my heartbeat no longer belonged to the rhythm of the waltz. It belonged to the wires and signals pulsing through the earpiece in my ear. Every step, every smile, every toast was a veil stretched over dynamite. I drifted closer to the bar, careful not to draw notice. Daniel leaned casually against the counter, his tuxedo immaculate, his glass half full, his smile too sharp. Oscar hovered just behind him, the shadow to his flame. Their words were hushed, but the earring recorder caught each syllable, threading it straight into Interpol's servers across the ocean. The shipment lands tomorrow night. Arms secured, routes clean, no interference. Daniel murmured, his Russian laced with confidence. By the time they know, we'll be untouchable. Oscar's lips curled in satisfaction. The Americans are blind. They see champagne and diamonds. They don't see soldiers hidden in crates. The blood in my veins turned to fire. There it was, confirmation clear and damning enough to tear the Volkov's empire down to its bones. I tilted my head, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, ensuring every word was sealed, authenticated. Across the room, Mike stood with a cluster of businessmen, his tuxedo unremarkable, his posture perfect camouflage. He raised his glass, tilting it ever so slightly, the tiniest flick of his wrist. The signal was clear, audio verified, chain of custody intact. We had them. Claire drifted past me, then her gown glowing white beneath the chandeliers, her face carved into triumph. She slowed, her lips barely moving as she leaned close enough for her perfume to sting my nose. "Don't embarrass me tonight, Emily." Her sneer was soft, disguised as sisterly advice, but her eyes held a blade. I didn't answer her. I couldn't. Not. Now not. With the weight of everything balanced on the next breath. She swept on, basking in applause, drunk on her own illusion of victory. The noise of the room dimmed in my ears. The music blurred. I saw only Daniel's face, so sure, so smug, so certain of his invincibility. I saw my father's laugh as he boasted my mother's pearls clutched in trembling hands, Claire's glittering smile, all blind, all complicit, all feeding this beast. My fingers brushed my hair again as if adjusting a loose strand, but the movement pressed against the mic concealed near my jaw. My voice slipped out in a whisper, steady as steel, unshakable. Nightingale. The single word was enough. On the encrypted line, Harris's voice answered calm and resolute. Countdown begins. 5 minutes. I exhaled slowly, the weight of years condensing into this one fragile instant. Around me, the ballroom laughed and drank, unaware of the storm curling just beyond their vision. A glass shattered somewhere on the far side of the room. A violinist struck a discordant note. The air itself seemed to tighten. 5 minutes until the raid. 5 minutes until every mask splintered. 5 minutes until the invisible daughter would finally be seen. The doors didn't open. They exploded. The crash tore through the ballroom like thunder shattering stained glass. The gilded double doors blew inward, a storm of splintered wood and smoke, and the glittering chandeliers above quaked from the force. Champagne flutes slipped from startled hands, crystals shattering across marble. Violins screeched to silence. Screams erupted like an orchestra gone mad. Black-clad Interpol agents flooded the room, their movements a choreography of precision. Tactical lights cut across sequined gowns and tuxedos, rifles lowered in steady arcs. Voices sharp and commanding. Everyone stay where you are. The glamour of paradise cracked in an instant, replaced by the raw terror of reality unveiled. Daniel Volkov spun, fury blazing in his eyes, but he didn't get the chance to play savior. Two agents surged forward, wrenching his arms behind him, shackles snapping closed on wrists that had signed off on blood and weapons. Oscar lunged as if to resist, teeth bared, but three more men were on him, forcing him to the floor. His curses in Russian ricocheted through the ballroom, guttural and venomous, yet powerless now. The guests cowered, frozen in disbelief. Pearls clutched, champagne dripping from forgotten stems. My father, Robert, barked in outrage, face red, spittle flying. What is the meaning of this? Margaret clung to his arm, trembling, her pearls rattling like bones. They were no longer the hosts of an empire, they were witnesses to its annihilation. Mike strode in at the head of the tactical unit, helmet discarded, his eyes burning with purpose. He caught my gaze across the chaos, a subtle nod, the signal that everything was unfolding exactly as planned. One of the lead agents approached, his voice steady but edged with reverence. Analyst Walker. Package secured. He said it loud enough for those closest to hear, for Robert and Margaret to understand that their invisible daughter had never been what they believed. Claire's scream cut through the cacophony, a blade of denial slicing the air. She stumbled forward, her gown glowing white under the harsh tactical lights. Her face twisted in disbelief. What does she have to do with this? Her voice cracked shrill, desperate, as if denial could stitch together the unraveling seams of her world. I turned toward her, calm as the eye of the storm. My heart thundered, but my words fell with quiet finality. Everything. The single syllable gutted her more than any blade could. She swayed, her hand clutching at the pearls around her throat, her face pale as her gown. The crowd parted as if repelled by her collapse, their adoration crumbling into whispers of shame and scandal. Claire's knees buckled, the lace of her skirt tearing as she crumpled into the marble floor, the pristine gown pooling like spilled milk across the polished stone. Her tiara clattered from her hair, spinning once before it lay still, a crown stripped of its power. And in that moment, paradise collapsed. In one night, every crown turned to ash. The ballroom reeked of smoke and spilled champagne, the chandeliers still swaying from the force of the raid. Guests had thinned to whispers and shadows, their silk gowns and tuxedos slinking out past the cordon of agents. What remained was ruin. Interpol's lights strobed across the shattered empire of the walkers, illuminating faces that had once glowed with pride. Now those same faces were gray, hollow, stunned into silence. Claire sat on the marble floor, her gown torn, streaked with grime and spilled wine. Mascara bled down her cheeks, black rivers cutting through powdered skin. Her tiara was gone, her voice a broken tremor. "Emily," she sobbed, reaching toward me with trembling hands. "Please, you can fix this. You always fix things. Help me." Her desperation hung heavy in the air, too sharp, too late. Robert, who had once boomed with arrogance about legacy, stood slumped near the overturned champagne fountain. His shoulders sagged as if the weight of generations had been ripped away in one swoop. The proud patriarch now looked a relic, his face-drawn eyes, bloodshot jaw trembling. "What have you done?" he rasped. But the fury had drained from his tone. It was not the roar of a lion, but the rasp of a man already defeated. Margaret clutched his sleeve, her pearls snapped and scattered across the floor like fallen stars. She looked at me with eyes glassy, her lips trembling on words she could barely shape. "Please," she whispered so soft the sirens nearly swallowed it. "Please save your sister. She's fragile. She needs you." The same plea I had heard my entire life, repeated like a prayer that excused everything. My phone buzzed with the latest update, assets frozen under RICO review. Every account flagged, every property seized pending investigation. The lawyer's text confirmed it. Claire's inheritance, Robert's empire, Margaret's illusions, all locked, suffocated under the same system they thought would never touch them. Their legacy had not only collapsed, it had been stripped bare, paraded for the world to dissect. Claire grabbed my wrist, her nails digging into my skin with a desperate strength. Her sobs tore through the smoke-filled air. "Don't leave me like this. You can tell them I didn't know, you can tell them it wasn't my fault. Please, Emily, please." I looked down at her, this sister who had laughed at my worth, who had mocked my work, who had chosen to bathe in luxury paid for by blood. For years I had bent, had vanished, had been invisible to preserve her glow. But now her glow was gone. All that remained was the shadow of who she chose to be. I pulled my hand free from her grip, slow, deliberate, the gesture final. My voice was steady, sharper than glass. "No, Claire, you ruined yourself." The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion, heavier than the raid, heavier than the crumbling of fortunes. She let out a strangled cry, collapsing fully onto the marble, her hands clawing at the lace, as though she could stitch her world back together. I turned. Robert's eyes followed me, hollow, pleading. Margaret whispered my name, a prayer that would never be answered. I walked past them, past the fallen crowns, past the ghosts of a family that had never chosen me, and I didn't look back. They once called me invisible. Now they call me indispensable. The words echoed in my mind as the glass walls of the Hague Command Center reflected the glow of dozens of screens. Rows of analysts moved with precision voices, low, their keystrokes weaving the silent music of justice. On the largest wall-sized display, red lines crossed continents' routes, severed bank accounts, frozen names flagged in bold. The Volkov Empire was a husk now picked clean by the same system it once manipulated. Director Harris stood at my shoulder, posture straighter than I had ever seen, the lines of his stern face softened. He studied the map glowing across the room and gave a small nod. "You dismantled a global threat, Emily. Piece by piece. You didn't just stop a family, you crippled an empire." His praise was understated, clipped, but for Harris those words were a coronation. Mike leaned against a console, his grin weary but proud. "Told you, Em. One day they'd choke on how wrong they were. Looks like that day finally came." His words brought me back to that first whisper in the SIF, when he'd seen in me what my family never could. I walked to the center console where the task force waited for my instruction. Not as their shadow, not as the invisible analyst hidden behind bigger names, but as their leader. The title carried no ceremony, it was in the way they turned to me, expectant, ready to follow. My fingers danced across the interface, pulling up a heat map of Europe. Frozen accounts pulsed in crimson. Seized warehouses dotted ports like extinguished stars. For the first time, I was not the forgotten daughter. I was the one who rewrote the story. A soft chime interrupted the hum of the room. My laptop screen flashed with a new message, Claire Walker, subject please. The single word cut through the command center's buzz sharper than any siren. My breath caught not because of shock, but because of how familiar it felt. The plea was her chorus line, her eternal script. I opened it. The sentences were short, frantic, typed at odd hours from some rented flat, where the air reeked of desperation. You don't understand. I didn't know everything. I can't survive like this. Help me. The words bled with the same entitlement that had defined her entire life, dressed now in the costume of despair. For a fleeting second, a part of me, the girl who once begged her mother for recognition, who once thought love might still be possible, paused. But the pause lasted no longer than a heartbeat. My jaw tightened. I highlighted the email and pressed delete. The screen blinked once, clean again, as though she had never spoken at all. Behind me, Harris was still dictating orders. Mike was briefing the tactical unit about the next phase of seizures. None of them noticed the small motion of my finger, the quiet severance of a lifetime's chain. They didn't need to. That choice was mine alone. I turned back toward the glowing map, its web of light spreading across continents. My reflection merged with it on the glass panel, no longer dim, no longer erased. The invisible daughter had vanished with the ash of last spring's wedding. What remained was a woman whose voice could bring down dynasties, whose silence could erase a sister's plea. Justice doesn't negotiate. And as I leaned forward, eyes fixed on the next target pulsing red on the map, I knew neither did I. Beneath the glitter of false crowns, the Volkovs crumbled, and the Walkers' illusions collapsed with them. Justice did not arrive quickly, but it came with the weight of every wound ignored, every voice silenced, and every slight endured. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. Like, share, subscribe, and leave your thoughts below. Comment 1 if you felt the weight of Emily's fight, or 2 if the ending left you wanting more.